for you and send them across.
Look, if any of these guys coming out perform the way guys like A.J. Brown did or Deebo Samuel, I would love them in a heartbeat. DK Metcalf. I mean, just watching those three in particular, in their rookie years was something to behold.
I think, James, let me stop you there, James. I think you missed out somebody, didn't you?
Who?
McLaurin.
Terry McLaurin.
First of all, you will not curse at me on this podcast, sir. You will not curse at me. Profane language and abuse of that kind will not be tolerated.
It's going to torture you for years, he is.
I love having Neil Kuiper Jr. on. Neil, the other thing is that it doesn't appear to be a very good class for offensive linemen. And when we get to what team needs are, every team is always, we need better offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for offensive tackles, Jay, then I think there's a handful of guys who are going to go quite early. But if you're looking for guards and centers, interior guys, then I'm afraid it's another poor year for that. There's no Quentin Nelson in this draft, Jay.
Mm.
I know you guys, obviously, you've lost your offensive line coach, so clearly you're going to be chasing some offensive linemen, I guess.
But are you trying to say I was being very transparent with where I was going with this? I was only bringing up positions that the Patriots might be interested in.
Yeah,
How dare you?
I can read you like an open book, full of blank pages.
Any other player that had a pretty good Senior Bowl that people may or may not be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to keep an eye. He didn't actually play in the game and went away quite early on because he kind of dominated the first couple of days. That's Javon Kinlaw, who's a defensive tackle from South Carolina. He is, Jay, you've heard me say this before. Sometimes, like last year, we had now who was the Jets took Quinnen Williams, the defensive tackle. These defensive tackles are going too high because these guys like Quinnen Williams, they're really good run stoppers. They're really good at clogging up the middle. But unless you're adding pass rush from that position on a consistent basis, you're wasting a pick going so high. And this year we've got another situation. We've got Derek Brown from Auburn, who is going to go quite high. Sometimes some mocks you see him up at number 3 to Detroit. He's a run stuffer. He's a big guy in the middle. It's an absolute waste of a pick. But then you've got Javon Kinlaw from South Carolina, and this guy is a guy who can muster decent pass rush pressure from the inside. And that, of course, as we know, with Aaron, whatever he's called, down there in the LA Rams, that's
Aaron
what
Donald.
you want. Aaron Donald, you want that sort of pressure, and he can put that sort of pressure on from the inside. Not maybe to Donald's level, but in that area, and that's a guy who's going to rocket up draft boards.
But Neil, let me ask you this.
Oh, go ahead, James.
Considering that Aaron Donald basically is what we're seeing now, once in a generational type player with his interior pass rush, and we're seeing a lot of, like you said, defensive tackles being rated high on draft boards unwarrantedly because everyone's looking for that next Aaron Donald. When does this taper off to when these guys tend to fall or, I would say level off to the point to where they're not considered highly touted coming out of college, warranting of a first-round pick?
Yeah. I wouldn't say they're not warranted a first-round pick, James. I think they're not warranted a top 10 pick. Washington's taken 2 defensive tackles in the last 3 or 4 years, all around the sort of 14, 15 pick in round 1. I think that's absolutely fine. But if you're putting a guy in the top 5, oh no, the guy, it's not worth it. And they say, Quinnen Williams can get inside pressure and can be a pass rush demon. No, he can't. He really can't. Getting 3 or 4 sacks in your college senior year doesn't make you anywhere close to an Aaron Donald level guy. So no. How long will it last, James? Your guess is as good as mine. Donald's been in the league for what, 5-6 years?
Yeah.
And they're still doing it. So, yeah.
Well, I would one respond with, we just mentioned that the interior of the offensive line is this class is pretty lousy. If the offensive linemen aren't getting any better and these defensive tackles are where we think they are or are as good as we think they are, they'll probably beat these guys. So it'll still take a generation before the cycle switches.
Yeah, possibly.
But I also feel like I think it all depends on scheme, though, too. Like, I think if you want to have, like, a Dallas Cowboys-like line where you just have a bunch of giant road-grading dudes, then, yeah, I mean, you have to try to find those diamonds in the rough. Well, not even diamonds in the rough. I mean, it's like picking guards high and things like that. You're looking for Quentin Nelsons, and there's just not a ton of those dudes anymore. Whereas you look at, we mentioned the Chiefs O-line has kind of outperformed what you would think, and you have the first overall pick in Eric Fisher, and you have Mitchell Schwartz, who is a free agent signing, but I think is probably the best right tackle in football. But all the guys in the interior have been like really low cost moves. It's like Austin Ryder, I think, was an undrafted guy, the center, bounced around with like the Redskins and the Browns. The Canadian Doctor was a 6th round pick. They now have Stefan Wisniewski, who I think was maybe a relatively high pick, like 10 years ago, but they got him off the draft heap in the middle of the season. They had another undrafted guy who he kind of replaced. I mean, I think honestly, and I don't know why teams don't seem to be focusing quite as much on this, but I think your O-line coach is like one of the most important assistants on the team, because I mean, you look at how much of the roster just the O-line and the depth guys like take up, and just developing those guys internally. And newsflash, Patriots just lost the best O-line coach in the league.
Why did you have to bring that up again? Why? I mean, I didn't bring it up. It's not on my list of things to talk about today.
I think it's clear to see the catastrophe deepens.
Hmm.
I think you're absolutely right, Nick. Absolutely right. Closest to the ball, I guess. Closest to the ball. Put your efforts in there.
Because like guys that have like a tackle frame you have to draft those guys high. You can't put small guys out at tackle. Like those are body types you have to try to attract, and it takes big assets to do them. But everybody in between, I mean, if you're willing to go for smaller guys and things like that and just try to coach them up or do whatever, I mean, it requires coaching. There's not going to be enough prospects in the draft to fill all of those spots on all of those rosters throughout the NFL.
Yeah, you can do much more on the interior line, because basically you're just talking about body mass in many instances. If you put 300-pound guys in front of an interior lineman who's pass rushing, you can kind of stop that more easily than you can some outside defensive end coming at your tackle at speed, where you need that talent to stop it.
All right, let's move to talking about the top free agents this particular offseason. Evan Silva released his top 100 free agents, and I thought it was a fairly fair assessment of the free agent class. Now, the one thing I will say is he also sort of admits that a lot of these guys that we're going to mention at the top, Dak Prescott, Ryan Tannehill, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, there's probably a solid chance that none of these guys actually become free agents. That all get re-signed by the teams that they're currently playing for. Jameis Winston at 5 also probably ends up in the same place. We know, as was mentioned earlier, Phillip Rivers will not be playing for the Los Angeles Chargers next season. The question is, does he play for another team, or is he retiring like Eli Manning did? Then there's Amari Cooper, who also probably won't end up making it to free agency. And that brings me to number 8, and you, Mr. Nick, with Chris Jones.
Yeah, so there's two big also overarching factors, and I think this free agency that really affect everything, and that just being the last year of the CBA. The two big ones are that. I've got that
listed as things to talk about too, so bring it up now. That's great. Blend the two.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like, so for one thing, in the past, you'd only use either the franchise tag or the transition tag to hold on to guys. Now you can use both in this last year. But the bigger one to me that I didn't even notice until this week, I threw it into Slack, and it totally screws up my conception of what at least the Chiefs free agency was going to be like, is the 30% rule, which is that unless a new CBA is signed before free agency, which I don't think there's much indication that it will be, then any contract signed in this year or in general, the salary increases can't, from like this year into these like kind of un-CBA'd years, can't be more than 30% each year. So if it's like a $10 million contract for this year, $10 million for this year, can't be more than $13 million next year, $16 million the year after that, $19 million the year after that. And so that really hurts teams' cap flexibility. I mean, I think there was some conversation earlier that people were talking about, oh, well, we know the CBA is going to be bigger for the cap, and so you can assign these deals and dump a whole bunch of the deal numbers into these future years. No, you can't actually. And so teams, like their current cap space really affects what they're going to have to do. And I think, we've heard some signs that for a while it sounded like it was a fait accompli that Mahomes was going to get his big deal like right after the season. They're now like the owner was actually kind of walking that back. And I think that's because they understand. I mean, there's no way they're going to be able to structure it to actually like have any of the new money take effect this year. And Chris Jones, I think, is kind of up in the air. I think they'll franchise him and maybe just make him play on the tag, or they'll trade him. I think he's worth Aaron Donald money for somebody, but I'm just not sure the Chiefs are going to be able to find that.
There's also, if there is no new CBA, you won't be able to do a post June 1st designation. So you won't be able to spread out the cap hit as you've been able to do previously. All of this, Ian Rappaport did report on the NFL Network right before we started recording. The NFL and NFLPA are actually meeting today as we're recording this. There's a chance, he adds, not likely, that a deal could be done within the week. And it does seem 17 games is one of the things that's holding things up. But I have a feeling this could go a little bit longer than this week.
The positive here, though, Jay, is that it looks like it's well on the way to being done in advance of any threat of players holding out and all the rest of it. So that's
well, it has to be.
Yeah, that's great.
based on these,
well, you say
based
that,
on all these things.
You guys won't remember. We did have a strike season once, which the magnificent Washington Redskins won the Super Bowl. You
don't say.
Yeah, but let's face it, that was not a happy time, and we had last time. I think we had threats of it, and it came quite close. All respect to both the NFLPA and the NFL for sitting down and getting this. Well, it looks like getting this sorted out early. That's great news for the fans. They should receive full credit for that. It's good news.
All right, back to Nick. Chris Jones, is he going to be a free agent or no?
He's not going to be a free agent. I think they'll tag him. They'll tag and trade him probably like they did with D Ford. See what they can get for him. I mean, D Ford franchise probably. The transition, I think, then it's like you basically create a bidding war, and you either have to match the other team's bid or not. So franchise tag, at least they get exclusive rights. But I mean, they got a future second for D4. I imagine it'd be a much higher, return for Chris Jones. Probably not what they had to pay for Frank Clark, but if they have to force him to play on the tag, I mean, for a defensive tackle, it's only like $15.5 million, which is a bargain for 1 year of Chris Jones on the open market. So I think that's the way that's going to go down.
Interesting.
Pod, real quick on the CBA negotiation you were mentioning. One of the things, and I hate to bring up the Pro Bowl, but the players at the Pro Bowl were interviewed about the CBA progression going into this week and their thoughts on it. And look, to a T, none of them are in favor of a 17th game. I understand the owners and the league are trying to push this. This is still a non-starter without reasonable compensation monetarily for the players. And this will probably be the one thing that holds it up more than anything else. Look, my 2 cents, Goodell, the 32 owners, presidents, GMs of every team just need to put on helmet and shoulder pads every Sunday for the next 4 months and just get beat to hell every Sunday for the next 4 months and see how they like it before they start deciding that these players need a 17th game, especially with, quote, trying to make the game safer and really taking hit trauma very seriously. Adding a 17th game doesn't help those two things.
Well, I think if we eliminate a fourth preseason game, see, that's the thing that I don't get about this argument is if you eliminate a preseason game and you put in a 17th regular season game, I brought this up at the end of this season. I mean, how many teams used week 16 or week 17 as essentially a non-compete game? How many teams benched their starters that week? A bunch.
Yeah, most of them had nothing to play for. They weren't going to change any positioning as far as the draft. They were locked in where they were locked in. The worst teams probably did it as well, unless they were trying to get some young talent out